Welcome. Good evening. I'm the curator and gallery coordinator here at CAL, and I'll be moderating tonight's discussion titled Glimpses from Latin American Poetry, Peru's Experience. We have the honor of being joined by two distinguished speakers who will guide us through a captivating exploration of literature and poetry. First, we have Dr. Anoud Sabah, director in the public sector in Kuwait, born in Kuwait. He has a master's degree in Spanish and Hispanic literature from the University of Barcelona. Her thesis is about identity and transliteration in the final stretch of Termo Fina, 1986, by Sue Camlin. She loves poetry and writes some in Spanish. She's the founder of Research Journey, the online platform for social and cultural connections. Among her favorite authors are Juan Rulfo, Gabriel Mistral, Jose Marti, and Carlos Pérez. Joining at Anoud is Pedro Sedano, peer diplomat and poet born in the city of Cusco, Peru. He's the founder of the Black Owl Literary Collective, where he publishes his poems periodically. His poems are part of the poetic anthology titled Los Usos. Amongst his works, we find the collections of poems Igor and Memories. His poetry is existential in nature, dealing with themes such as everyday life, emptiness, joy, life, and death. Among his favorite authors are Manuel Sforza, Cesar Vallejo, Pablo Neruda, Vicente Alexandre, and amongst others. Together, Anoud and Pedro will offer us glimpses into the rich tapestry of Latin American literature with a focus on Peruvian poetry, and we'll have time again for questions from the audience. General questions, we'll start with both of you. Can you briefly describe the context of Latin American literature today?
First of all, thank you to all of you for coming. Today we will talk about something a bit of the Latin American literature. Asking your question, Rosan. Of course, it's 1 hour. It's not enough to talk about the whole Latin American literature. So we will just focus on the most important authors and the most important periods of the Latin American poetry movement. I consider that are the most important, and also related to the Peruvian literature, especially the Peruvian poetry. Well, the Latin American literature had a very specific and very important period of time that we call the Latin American boom, where you find the well-known authors like Mario Vargas Llosa, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, also another novelist like Cortázar, Julio Cortázar, and those are the most famous. And this movement is very important because it changed the way we see the literature in Latin America. We had the influence of the Spanish literature with the method, the numbers, the rhythm, and a specific musicality. But with the boom, Latin American boom, these techniques changed because also the problems that Latin American countries faced were impacted to all the spheres, to all areas, political, the cultural field, and of course the literature area. So the Latin American poetry was marked by this political process and cultural new processes that Latin American countries were in. So another important factor during this period is the protection or the way the authors were seeing their own country. That means rediscovering the traditions or promoting the traditional values In many of the Latin American countries, the indigenous movements were arising, and that took a very important part of these literatures in Peru and in Latin America. So, regarding the Peruvian authors, we have to mention, for example, Julio César, José Carlos Mariátegui, which is one of the most important, Manuel Escorza, and in the poetry scene, César Vallejo. That as a general overview of the Latin American literature and also a bit of poetry.
Absolutely, thank you. Dr. Anoud, you have some points.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to see you all, familiar faces. This question is very close to my heart as I don't come from the region. So what attracts me to Latin American literature is, first of all, the social movements. And as my colleague was saying about the boom. The boom was the movement in which the writers were independent from all the colonial period of literature. So they had a voice, they represented their own nations, where they represented their own ethnic identity and the combination of linguistic differences that were occurring in their own countries. So this has to be celebrated because they're one of the countries that were able, or regions that were able to integrate everyone in their own literature of the time. And specifically to myself, Gabriela Mistral is one of the feminist writers or the first female writers that was acknowledged, and she's a great poet as well. And one of the topics close to my heart is the magic realism of most of the writers that of the time, period of time. I would say Gabriel Marquez is one of the most famous ones, but he's not the only one that comes from the magic realism. I'm a fan of Julio Cortázar, who's also a very strong realist of the time. And since we have many of my Latin American friends here, Juan Rulfo is one of the most favorite of all times. To me, he's the equivalent of Najib Mahfouz to the Arab world. Carlos Fuentes is one. In poetry, we talk about Octavio Paz, of course. And since we're talking about Peru, I have to say, mention, of course, César Vallejo, who is considered one of the main poets of Peru and one of the most influential Peruvian writers in the 21st or 20th century in Peru, in Latin America, sorry. And when we speak about Peru itself, we have also Ricardo Palma, which was one of the first poets dated 1870, in the 1870s or early 19th century. He's one of the first poets of the time. And my colleague mentioned José Carlos Mariátegui also because he is one of the first writers to speak about the realism of the reality of Peru, and he was one of the close friends of César Vallejo, so they did work together in the Peruvian literature movement, or literary movement. And before we move to another topic, I would like to read a verse of César Vallejo, which is one of my favorite, and it talks about absence, olvidar. So, ausente la mañana que a la playa del mar, del sombra, del callado imperio, como un pájaro lúgubre me vaya, será el blanco panteón tu cautiverio. So, being from this part of the world, it describes many things that represent me. The birds, the beach, I mean, a lot of things I find myself very attracted to. Thank you.
Thank you, that was amazing. You briefly mentioned indigenous cultures influencing the boom period. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how it influenced Peruvian poetry specifically? And does it have taglines to contemporary poetry at the moment?
Yes. Well, in my case, I have two influence, two Peruvian poets. One is a novelist, but has a poetic side. But the most important, of course, is César Vallejo. It changed the way we see the poetry in Peru. He used the Spanish language in a unique way. He created new words. He changed the syntaxes. He was like trying to find new meanings in the word. So that for his time, at the time Vallejo was writing his poetry, was very interesting and very important for what was going to happen after that, after Vallejo. So Vallejo, the poetry of Vallejo talked about the life, about death, about religious, and an important subject of his poetry is also how he linked all these aspects with what we called after that the indigenous movement. So he was like a pioneer in that area, and that's why it's also very important in Peru. He followed also the literature movement, the modernismo, which was like the pillar of the Latin American novelists and Latin American poets. So this poet, being Peruvian, was also a main influence in my work. And the other author is Manuel Escorza. He's a novelist, but everybody knows Manuel Escorza because of his novels. He related. He talked about the indigenous communities and the fight they had with transnational companies protecting their land. Using also what after that we were known as magical realism, but he was also a poet, and he has the poetic side that I prefer and I like. It's very simple. He talked about love, about absence, farewells, and also death, yes. So those are the topics I like and I use and I write in my work. Those two.
Amazing, thank you. Speaking of your work, you have a website designed specifically to encourage younger poets. Can you talk more about that and what inspired you to create it?
Thank you, Rosa. Yes, we have, there is the Black Hole, but in Spanish is Búho Negro. It's a literary collective that some of my friends and I were young poets trying to share our work, and we found the easiest way on a website. So what we did was to invite all the young poets and writers to send all their poems, select those poems, and use the Búho Negro website as a platform for them. So they started to send many poems, and we will be increasing the activity in the webpage. What was interesting is that many young Peruvian writers, poets, were sending their works, and then they started to work harder and more and send more of their works. So that means that just with the webpage, we were developing the cultural and the literature sector in our city first, and then we expanded that. And many young writers.
That's amazing. How do you envision it impacting younger generations afterwards? Since you started it with your friends, now it's growing to something a little bit bigger. What do you think it's going to lead to, or how do you think it's going to influence people?
Actually, when we finish we didn't finish, but when we collect all the poems, we organize some of the poems by topics, and we made an anthology. So those young poets published their poems with that anthology. They were very motivated because of that, and continue working on a new project that we are going to finish, I hope, soon. But that is an example of how this idea of making just creating a website, gathering young poets, is having an impact in their lives and also in the cultural area in my city and also in Peru.
Absolutely. I will jump to Dr. Anoud for now, and we'll come back and keep talking about the website. Dr. Anoud, can you talk to us about your time studying about Latin American literature? You studied in Spain. What made you decide to move to Spain and pursue that?
Okay, I have to jump 20 years before. So those who know me know that I studied Spanish at a young age, more than 20 years ago. And towards the intermediate level, we were asked to choose topics of interest. So walking through the Kuwait bookshop in Al-Muthanna that does not exist anymore, this might be nostalgic to most of us, I came across this wonderful book. And it's in Spanish, and it's an introduction to Hispanic or Hispano-American literature from the conquest to the 20th century for Spanish learners. So this is made easy. So my introduction to Latin American world in the form of literature started around 20 years ago when I invited them to study this book with me. So I got introduced to Garcia de la Vega. He is Peruvian Spanish, and he wrote his chronicles about his life in Peru because his mom was a family of the Inca. They were, I think, confirmed the nobility. His mom was a noble Inca. His father was a soldier, so he's the first writer who brought Peru to the world in that sense. So I got introduced to him. I got introduced to Jose Martin for my fellow Cubans and his versos sencillos, and Cesar Vallejo as well, Juan Rulfo. So the main names of Latin American writers were all mentioned here. After this, so we skipped to 2017, I was doing my PhD in Spain, so I decided to go for a master's close to my heart. So I studied this. It took a long time because of COVID, so I graduated late, but my topic of interest had to do with China as well. So it was about identity and transculturation in the Peruvian society, the Peruvian literature, which was a movement that has gone across Latin America because they have faced a lot of social movements and integration with the indigenous people, the Afro-Latin American, the Asian Latin American, and so forth, and how they were welcome and integrated in the society that was reflected in literature. So the book I studied was El Final, written by a Chinese living in Peru. So it tells you all about the importance of religion, the importance of the integration in society, and how the food was integrated into society. A lot of Peruvian food has a lot of Asian influence, and so forth. So it's basically the social movement and the reflection of the society in literature. So Peru has a lot to offer when it comes to literature because it has a big Afro-Peruvian movement. and also Arab, but I'm not very familiar with Arab because the Arab literature movement in Latin America is very different in each country, but indigenous is one important, Asian is another important one. And I hope to see more feminist writers, they call it feminist narration or feminist literature in Peru. So this is basically my interest in Latin American literature, specifically Peru, started from a Chinese perspective, I guess.
That's amazing. It does talk about globalization and influences of cultures like all around, whether it's within food and politics, within like movements of colonization. Absolutely. We'll go back to Pedro. I have a question about your website again. Do you have any advice for young poets who are starting their journey, maybe exploring the website for the first time? How do you want them to kind of integrate into the platform that you created?
Thank you, Rosan. I think the most important advice would be to when you start writing, sometimes you're not so confident about what you write. You're really. So there is you could feel afraid of what people is going to say. And also because you share something very private and intimate, yes? And not all people can share those very personal feelings, emotions, or ideas easily. So the advice for the young poets is to send their work freely, with no friend, no any kind of yes. After you send your first poem or any kind of art, and after you know that you can develop yourself while experiencing and working and discovering yourself in the literatures and the literature movements, you will find that you will be writing, and probably until the end of your life, you won't find yourself. So the first step is the most difficult, because if you are young, you're afraid of those opinions, probably negative opinions. So you have to be persistent and consequent with your ideas, and believe in what you're doing. Yes.
Absolutely. What role do you see your website playing in the broader landscape of literary communities and platforms for young writers, not just in Latin America or Peruvian lenses? How do you see this expanding beyond?
Yes, thank you. Yes. Thank you for that question. Yeah, we started in Cusco, which is the historical capital of Peru. And then we invited another authors from Brazil, Mexico, European authors, and now that I'm here working as a diplomat in the Embassy of Peru, I try to include and connect the region, the Arab region, with my culture, the Peruvian culture, and of course Latin American culture. So the first step we did was to invite Dr. Anoud to send their poems in Spanish. So last 3 days before, no, last week, yes. So we published one of her poems, And we mentioned that she studied literature and she writes poems also in Spanish, and she's from Kuwait. So that is very important for us because that is the way how you connect people through literature, in this case through poetry. And we did that thanks to our Black Hole webpage. Yes.
I love the name in contrast with everything that it has produced. You know, it's not a literal black hole where things disappear, but things come out and collaborate with the rest of the world. Well, speaking of poetry, we talked a lot about the systems around it and the website. Can you read a poem of your choice that you'd be possibly interested in sharing?
Yes, thank you. Well, I wrote with me one poem. I will read it in Spanish, and I don't know, maybe you.
The code under Pedro's name, the links of poems, it will be there.
If you didn't hear that, there's a code on the bookmarks that you got from outside, and you can find the translated poems in there.
Yes, there is a translated. Thank you. The poem is Hora Cualquiera. En tanto, veo gotear el espacio como en sueño. Se derrite, se extingue poco a poco a cada parpadeo. No existe ruta de retorno. Es decir, no cabe luz para ninguna memoria, ninguna noción de lo vivido. Pienso, como si fuese posible estar sin el recuerdo, como si fuese posible estar sin lanzar la moneda. Estamos solamente en la silueta, en el marco externo calcinado por el fuego, en el rasgado de la corteza abierta, en la herida. Cuestiono el quiebre de la mente, las rupturas irreparables. Dudo de la caída de las flores, si no está el jarrón deshecho. Si no derrama desde el alma la soledad de la vida y el color final posterior a la muerte. Me parece que el horizonte líquido va quitando la esperanza. Solo flotan algunos pájaros ahogados, de espaldas, de alas tiesas. Nadie supo al final sus nombres. Nadie más volverá a su canto, seguramente. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Could you just briefly talk to us about what that means for you and then chose that poem?
Yes. Well, this is a poem. One of the topics I write about is ordinary things that seems that they are ordinary, but they are not. The feeling of emptiness, the feeling of absence, is a feeling everybody has, and sometimes you don't know how to explain that, how to call that feeling. But everybody has passed through this feeling, so it's universal. And when this feeling comes, there's no way back, because it already came, so it's with you. Nothing can change that. So you can see the nature, you can admire the world, but in the end, everything will finish, and we can't do anything about it. So basically, that is the feeling, because I believe that when you write a poem, poem comes. And it has the poem is alive. So it's the consequence of what you are feeling, what you have lived, but you don't decide over the poem. That's what I believe. So that in this case, the topic was this kind of emptiness probably loneliness, that then you see the hope in the future, but you already know that also achieving this hope, reaching this hope won't be enough. If there's a way to explain that point, that
Yeah.
that's
Incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
thank you.
I'll jump back to Dr. Anoud. I'm very curious on how the environment in Spain impacted your perspectives in writing. You said you mentioned writing in Spanish too. So can you talk about what inspired you to express yourself in Spanish? How did the environment impact your decisions?
Okay. First of all, being in a city like Barcelona is it's an artistic cultural experience, to be honest. And I started journaling in Spanish every day, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to write about in my thesis. So walking by the beach in Barcelona, going to all the events regarding literature and the arts is one of inspiration. And another very important inspiration for myself is actually traveling to the countries I care for. So being in the nature plays a very big role. So being in a beautiful country like Mexico, for example, or Colombia, Honduras, Brazil, Argentina, I mean, I've been there. So each country leaves a sentiment and emotion that takes over you. As you were saying, poetry comes from a strong emotion, or a plane, going back home from a plane, looking at a palm tree somewhere. For me, the beach and the palm trees are very nostalgic. It's home. So all these moments that you are in a country, meeting different people, enjoying the mountains, the rivers, are all inspirations, at least from my perspective, that helps me express myself and also discover myself. If I ever do in this lifetime, I think it will be through traveling.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see any similarities maybe between Arab culture and Caribbean culture or Latin American culture, or even Spanish?
Okay, I actually will find this difficult to answer in a way. Apart from the linguistic heritage that Spain has from Arabic as a language, we have a lot of common values when it comes to family values, and the importance of religion. Religion is very important to all of us. And God is present in a lot of poetry, specifically, and love and death. We treat these two topics in very different ways, but they are there. And we have the same colonial movements as Arabs with Latin America. We also have social movements, very strong social movements that are represented in literature. And we also have great feminist movements in literature and poetry as well. These are the way I could see the resemblance. And also they were able to captivate the society. When I'm a for fans, I have to just mention that he's one of the novelists that you can just open a book and you can read and you can imagine the streets smell, how the street smells. You can actually hear the whispering of the people in the street, and you feel like you're in Mexico. He can deliver that sensation. And when you come to Peru, we have Los Perros, La Ciudad de los Perros, Maribel Sosa. Also, he gives you a different perspective and image of Peru. Each writer has a way of delivering, but for me, Maruf was so simple. He represents a simple person. He doesn't use very difficult language nor sentence structure. It's so simple that you can feel everything he's trying to deliver as a writer and as a poet. He's so simple, and with his simplicity, he delivers all the emotions that you like. This is from my perspective. I'm sure other of the audience can share one of any of the comments. You have many different perspectives. Octavia Paz is also great. Pablo Neruda also spoke about oil and politics, which is also very similar to our reality today, but also from a very different perspective. But I would say we all have same values. We love, we respect religion, which is beautiful, and we have great food.
Absolutely. I wanted to mention that word too. And design and art too, visual art.
If you go there, you will be inspired for sure.
Definitely. So you mentioned your favorite poets and writers. How do their writings impact your work specifically?
Honestly, I wouldn't say my works as in works. I enjoy reading a lot, and the simplicity of what attracts me is the source of my inspiration. So I'm a simple person in terms of emotions. So my poems are simple, and they deliver the emotions as they are. You will not find the linguistics superiority. You will not find, as we have the Spanish ambassador Góngora style. I'm more of a Lope de Vega style. I'm sorry, more of a simple emotion to be delivered. I don't have that superiority or supremacy of the language as the creators of, let's say, Spanish modern poetry now. So the simpler it is for me, the more beautiful it is. Yeah.
And the harder just to make, I think.
As Pedro mentioned, silence and absence and these emotions are felt and transmitted the way they're felt. So whatever language that you feel, and in my case, I feel it in Spanish, which is maybe very difficult to, not to apprehend, but difficult to justify. I mean, it's not my mother tongue, and it's not even a second language. It comes way after. But I was inspired because I loved the way they write. It's a music very light. I think poetry is the language of the soul. My heart is Spanish and half my soul is. So I would say it that way.
In that case, would you be down to read a poem of your choice?
I will read two as mine are shorter, and I'll talk about them later on. La belleza de la naturaleza, bello paz, amor y curiosidad, sonidos de la vida, agua y viento y pájaros, son los ruidos que palpita el corazón, luces y sombras bailando ante los ojos, olores de nostalgia, palmera, tierra y mar, así son las imágenes de mi vida. So, that is the part where I say my nostalgic part of things. I have two poems that are close to my heart. One that Pedro and Negro published, which is about this specific silence or the silence itself, and I have freedom. So which one would you prefer? Silence. Okay. Con este silencio pacífico te siento muy cerca, a veces me completa, a veces me deja perdida. En tus ojos me veo clara, fuerte y viva. Sin ti, ¿qué haría? Temo una soledad sin elegir, temo lejanía sin querer, al final temo un silencio vacío.
Can you talk a little bit about that? How makes you feel? Why you chose it specifically?
Oh, okay. Which ones? Both?
Up to you. I think both. I would love to hear both.
As I said earlier, that palm trees and the sea are a source of my inspiration. I grew up here, so they remind me of home, and I see it everywhere. So, and that's why I chose Spain to study. This is a confession, and that's why I like Malaga and I like Barcelona as a cities to visit. They make me feel home. And when I talk about silence is a place I go to when I need to think. I go to when I'm happy. I go to when I'm sad. I have mixed emotions about silence. Silence is a happy place when I choose to go to it, and it will be a place of loneliness when it's not not a choice, when it just happens and it takes you there. So in this case, it's not a voluntary silence.
Yeah. Amazing. Are there any things that we both want to talk about that we didn't cover before we go to Q&A from the audience?
I just would like to thank Pedro for giving me the chance to express myself, and it's a bit difficult for a non-speaker to publish poems in another language, so he encouraged me and to be published in his blog makes me really happy, since it's the first time I actually publish my own writing in a public form. My friends have read my writings. I have many of them. So it took a bit of courage to speak about it. I'm very happy to share it, and I think if it's something that my soul chooses to go to, I will continue. Thank you.
No, I want to thank also Dr. Anoud, because she's very keen on the cultural events. And since we met, we shared books about poetry, literature. I read a bit of her thesis, and it's very interesting how I mean, from this part of the world, Kuwait, the Arab region, Dr. Anoud addressed and talked about Peruvian culture, but a specific part of the Peruvian culture, which is the Chinese influence. So that's a very specific topic. So I was very surprised coming from a place so far from Peru. And also I want to thank CAP, and thank again Dr. Anoud, because she organized also with the help of CAP and made this event possible. And of course, we cannot talk about all the Latin American literature, because it's a lot, and there are many authors, and we just talked tonight about a few of these actors, the ones we prefer, the ones I prefer also, and these kind of events, as I told before, are very helpful to understand each other, to understand another culture. There is a big gap because of there are no bilingual editions from the books, the most important books, authors from Peru to the Arabic, and it's the same in Peru. We don't know too much about the Arabic poetry, about the women poets, the women Arab poetry, and those aspects, I think, with these events can be evaluated, and we can foster this intercultural exchange.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Rosa.
My pleasure. Thank you too. We'll have some time for questions from the audience. Does anyone have any?
Buenas noches. I'd like to speak Spanish, but unfortunately I cannot. Thank you so much for this beautiful evening. I was so impressed by Dr. Anoud with her, she's my cousin, but unfortunately I don't know anything about knowing her in Spanish and knowing about her thesis and her PhD. As I always said, I'm a poet, by the way, and I always say art and music can unite everyone and can have one language that can spread love, humanity, and mercy to all of the world. Senor Sedano, we know a lot about Latin American novelists and poets like Isabel Allende, Yusa, Pablo Neruda, but we don't know about the Peruvian poets and literature specifically. Can you explain that? And the other thing is, I hope there is a good collaboration between Kuwait and Peru. We share a lot of common points, in tradition and family ties and loving the art and loving music. So I hope that one day we do have some Peruvian night with poetry, with introducing with novelists and poets. Muchas gracias.
Gracias por la pregunta. Thank you for the question. Yes, that is a problem, to be honest. That most of our poets, Peruvian authors, are known in Latin America. Some of them in Europe, but because of the gap of the language to translate from the Spanish to the Arabic, I think it's understandable that there is no Peruvian poets themselves translated to the Arabic. So that could be an answer why these poets are not known probably in the Arab region. I could mention again César Vallejo, which is very, very important. It's a pillar of the poetry in Latin America. As I told before, it changed the way we see the poetry, not only in Peru, but also in Latin American countries. And I could say that also in Hispanic countries. There are other poets, of course, from Peru. I can list them. We have women poets such as Blanca Varela. They are known in Peru. They are important because of their works. Of course, we would like to present, to show their works in this region. We would like to find a way how to translate these editions, contact the authors, and to be translated to the Arabic, so that we can share all these works, all this poetry in this region. That is a task that is pending, that I hope with this kind of events we can start this, make the first step to solve this problem that I was mentioning in the beginning. And of course, we would like to share the Peruvian culture, not only with the literature or poetry, but also with our dance, our traditions, music, gastronomy, because all is related at the end. So I think that can answer your question.
Do we have any more questions?
Any more questions? Ah. Sorry.
Just a comment and to congratulate the two exposers, Sheikha and our good friend Mr. Pedro Sedano, and of course congratulate for the reading of their poetry that I think we enjoy very much. As ambassador of Peru, I just want to express that I'm very proud that Sheikh Anoud, Dr. Anoud, approached the embassy and found a good partner to start these kind of initiatives, to develop and to disseminate, to promote poetry, exchange of culture as a part of the cultural exchange between Peru and this important city and country, which is the state of Kuwait. So we're looking forward, with all the support of the embassy, for next other endeavors in this direction, as the preoccupation of the lady was mentioned, right? So thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us. Cheers. Gracias.
Thank you. I would like just to mention or to ask, this is a question. I know how vast and Latin American literature is, although most of it, except of course the Guyanas and Brazil, is written in Spanish or in Castellano. But we mentioned what, most of the most known and famous and well-known authors. Vargas Llosa, Paz, both were Nobel Prize winners. But for me at least, I think we skipped the greatest poet. He's before the boom, of course, but I think he is the root of many of this boom and post-boom poets and novelists, which is Jorge Luis Borges. I think Borges is the root of the 20th century Latin America literature. I mean, from him derives many things, and he covers a very, very vast, how can I say, array of themes from the Aleph, from his poetry and his books and everything. Well, at the end, he became Swiss in heart, and he decided that to be his final resting place. But what would you think of Borges' influence in, let's not talk about Mexico or Colombia or just Peru. Was there an impact that you feel, Pedro, that Dr. that you can sense in specific boom movement of Peru?
Thank you. Yes, of course. There's no doubt that the influence of Borges in Peru, of course, and also in Latin American literature, I would say in the world. Borges wrote about many topics. So, and I consider Borges as a universal author. And he was very important for the Latin American boom. He published the first works of many of those authors that were created without knowing the Latin American boom, such as Cortázar. Cortázar, for instance, Julio Cortázar, the Argentinian writer, published their first works with Borges. So that is just an example of how one simple person, not simple, but one person, like Borges, could influence to many other authors. And until now, the contemporary literature is influenced by the work of Jorge Luis Borges. And thank you for the question, because yes, we cannot skip Jorge Luis Borges.
I think I can, but I'm not so.
Just to add, Borges is one of the most famous writers of Latin America, and he was the reason why they got translated and transmitted to Europe. He is the number one. But to be fair, he's very difficult to read and understand. And this is one of the main reasons why most of us that are non-Spanish speakers suffer to understand most of Borges' work. He's sophisticated in many sense, and he is considered the pillar of the writers that came later. And then he has influenced Cortázar, but Cortázar at some great degree was clearer to us, more clear to the audience. So we did share in education, in classes. Borges was one of the difficult writers, and Ernesto Salto was another. Very complicated, it takes you psychologically to a different dimension. So it's not that they're not important, it's just on a personal level, they were not as impactful. Thank you.
Any more questions?
And just very briefly, I wanted to first of all congratulate both poets, both authors for being here. This is a unique event from my point of view. In more than 3 years and a half in the country, I haven't been in anything like that. It's not that there is no literature in Kuwait, but definitely not much that we are aware of, or that we are invited, or that is really bringing these feelings so close as it happened in so many other positions that I had in the past. So I think I'm very glad to see that at least you are opening a way from that point of view, not only for spreading literature or poetry, but also to try to build a bridge between 2 or 3 worlds in that case, which is Spain as a crossroads, where you started in the Mediterranean, where so many, of course, cultures and civilizations landed finally at the end of the day. And all that story went to America in a way, even the poets that wrote in Arabic in Spain during the golden period of the Al-Andalus, like Bidor or even Khaldun and some others. I think the importance of this cross culture is unique and people are not very much aware of. And I think you are playing a very interesting role in connecting the different worlds. It's a shame that we don't have here, as we have in other countries, Instituto Cervantes, because this is the type of institution that normally is not, of course, devoted only to Spanish literature language, but all Latin American, and in general to literature in capital letters. So it's something that I wanted to pay a contribution when I came, but it was really difficult to persuade anyone in Madrid or in Amman, where we depend on the Cervantes from Amman, to see the possibility of opening, because this type of events will be very common. We don't have a forum or a place to do something like that, so I could encourage you to try to set up, organize something in this journey. I think we have these 2 very enthusiastic young poets, and I think that would be a very interesting initiative in order to build these bridges between these 3 areas of the world, not Spain as the crossroads, but Latin America definitely, and all the Latin American culture in Peru, of course, and as it has been studied here tonight, and the other world that has a lot of things that people are completely unaware. I'm really all the time finding people who go to Spain, and it's very few of them who really speak Spanish or even try to understand a bit more about what's going on in our country. So I really congratulate you for that, and thank you for this interesting event.
Thank you.
It's not a question.
First of all, I've heard a lot of comments about building on a crossroads of literature to have a platform. But I would like to thank Razan and Ibrahim and Kab for giving us the space and encouraging us to have this event. So if you would like to ever send us any poetry that you write, if you would like to collaborate on works that are not only Peruvian, or we're inclusive of all Spanish-speaking literature, or if you'd like to speak to a Spanish audience with your Arabic or English poetry, even Italian Giovanni, it's fine. We're here to understand one another. This is a safe space to express yourself in the language and the emotion you prefer to express. And I think we should build a platform in which we can all share our arts, cultures. I would not mention food again, but travel maybe. Thank you.
I'd also like to self-advertise as the curator of camp that we're always open for applications and proposals, whether it's like literature, poetry, music, fine art, visuals. And yeah, now that I'm here, I'm trying to also expand our cultural grasp over the country and the people that are here, have this space be a lot more inclusive and diverse. So send us your ideas, we're open. Do you have any last questions? Yeah.
Sorry.
This way.
Another question, excuse me. What drives you, Senor Sedano, concerning the poetry? What makes you write? What's your motive?
Yeah, it's very complex.
And excuse me, there's another question. Did the Peruvian poems came across with the haiku, Japanese poems? Do we see like haiku in Peruvian poems?
No, I don't think there is haiku.
Because in Arabic, we can find a lot of haikus written in Arabic originally.
That's very interesting. No, but that didn't happen with the Spanish in Peru. Regarding your first question about what drives me to write, I think it depends on what. I mean, each writer, each author has his own method or his own way to create. In my case, the emotion, the feelings are the first step, and after that, this creative process starts. It's difficult to explain because for me it's like I just see I remember something, or I just see something that reminds me an event of my life, or an event or a desire, something I hope I would like to experience. And then you select. You start creating, you select the words, and you change the words. Because sometimes you write, and after you finish, you read the poem, and then you don't like the poem. It's not complete. It's not what you thought, and most important, it's not what you felt. So that's also what I was talking about before. It's like if the poem finds you, in a way to say. And it's an easy way to answer us. But that is the truth. It happened to me also that sometimes you just heard, you just see a word, you read something, and then you start writing. And then just writing, it's like, you could say that even you don't know how you were thinking in that moment, but after when you read the poem, it makes sense because it was a feeling. I know that Hemingway used to believe and say that if what you're writing is true, I mean it's beautiful. So I believe in that. I don't know if that. That's. Thank you.
Are there any last questions? I think this is a really beautiful point to end the discussion. Do you guys want to add anything as a final remark? Good to go. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your input, your knowledge, your passion, your interest. It was a pleasure moderating and working with you. I hope the audience enjoyed it as much as I did. And yeah, bookmarks are outside, and there's some sweets and water. But thank you all for joining us, and come back again.